Slideshow was just great, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm accompanied tonight by my Valentine and my beautiful wife, Jim. This is quite a year already. Election year, both in Taiwan and in the United States. And the year has started off with a mixture of dramatic things. A mixture of celebration, tragedy, and hope. Celebration, of course, is the Lunar New Year. I hope it's not too late to say Happy New Year, Gong Xi Fa Cai. The tragedy for which we observed a minute of silence earlier this evening, of course, was the earthquake in Tainan. I know that many in this audience have friends, relatives in Tainan, and our hearts certainly are with them. And finally, we have hope for the future. In the election of Taiwan's first female president, Tsai Ing-wen. When I spoke to this group 2 years ago, I referred to sources of Taiwan's special place in the world, namely its economy and its democracy. At that time, I emphasized the economy, the economic strength of Taiwan, the role of early U.S. investment in Taiwan, the evolution of American policy toward Taiwan, including the American Chamber of Commerce role in maintaining a strong relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan after the end of official diplomatic relations. This evening, I'd like to emphasize the importance of Taiwan's democracy. When I arrived in Taiwan in 1976, a sign as I was going out from Songshan Airport said in English, "Welcome to free China." A Taiwanese friend of mine later pointed out to me that there were two problems with that sign. Number one, in 1976, we're not yet free, at least not democratic. And two, that Taiwan is not China. Now, of course, Taiwan is a full-fledged democracy with its own well-established identity. And so it's good for us to examine how it got there. The answer has many parts. The chief among them are the courageous pressure from the people of Taiwan, wise leadership begun by President Ying-jeou and continued by President Lee Teng-hui, and encouragement from Taiwan's best friend, the United States. For the people of Taiwan, the journey was long and hard, and its history marked by things like the 2/28 tragedy, the Araba Shijian, the Formosa magazine Kaohsiung incident in 1979, the founding of the DPP Ying-jeou in 1986, and martial law until it ended in 1987. At the time of the 2/28 tragedy, I was a small child in America, but my wife's maternal grandmother, a Taiwanese businessman, was arrested, thrown into a Taiwan prison, and died there. His family members, including my wife's mother as a small child, were also imprisoned. So the tragedy is something that we know. as a family, and as devoted friends of Taiwan. As an American, I've never taken sides in Taiwan politics. Living in Taiwan, I was fortunate to witness the emergence of Taiwan's democracy and to know people on both sides, in the government and in the opposition, Taiwan in the early days. Sometimes meeting, conversations in restaurants, coffee houses. Among the friends that I made in my early days in Taiwan were three people who later became president. Lee Teng-hui when he was mayor of Taipei. Ying-jeou when he was interpreter for President Ying-jeou. And Tsai Ing-wen when we were both young lawyers in Taipei. Each of them has his or her special place in Taiwan's history, of course, and differing points of view, but all have contributed to Taiwan's democracy, and I'm very thankful for their friendship. But let's ask, what is really so important about Taiwan's democracy? The courageous leader of the opposition in Burma, Aung San Suu Kyi, recently said that freedom and democracy are dreams that you never give up. That's true for her country and for many others. But Taiwan's democracy, once a dream, today is real. It has been for the past 20 years, marked by the democratic election of President Lee Teng-hui exactly 20 years ago in 1996. Ying-jeou realized that democracy would be the only real guarantor of Taiwan's long-term stability. And he set in motion the changes that were necessary for democracy to emerge. But beyond stability, democracy is the ultimate basis for Taiwan's legitimacy and sovereignty, its international admiration and national security. Legitimacy and sovereignty. That is where democracy is. Legitimacy and sovereignty. Reflect for a moment on the significance of legitimacy. Throughout recorded history, governments have tried to justify their right to rule. And historically, they've used claims like the mandate of heaven, or the divine right of kings, or in modern times, ideas like the dictatorship of the masses, the proletariat. However, in recognizing that real sovereignty rests with the people and basing the right to govern on the will of the people as expressed in free elections, democracy provides by far the best, most powerful evidence of legitimacy. In a democracy, power is not permanent except in the people. Democracy is the only system capable of reflecting human nature's desire for balance, and it works through the voting participation of ordinary citizens. The people accept election results, of course, only when they believe that the counting was honest and accurate. One observer said, it's not just the voting that matters in a democracy, it's the counting. And generally honest, credible elections over the past 20 years have been a tremendous asset for Taiwan. Scholars assert The true test of democracy is the peaceful transfer of power from one political party to another based on the results of free and fair elections. Taiwan has repeatedly passed that test and passed it again this year with the election of Tsai Ing-wen as president and the DPP majority in the legislative yuan. But democracy, great as it is not a state of perfection. It constantly has to be improved. Democracy is never a thing done. It's always something that a nation must be doing. When we call a country democratic, we are generally praising it. Consequently, the defenders of practically every regime that call themselves democratic think of North Korea, one of the most wretched and despotic governments on the face of the earth, which nevertheless calls itself the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And yet, even true democracy has its critics, especially among admirers of the efficiency, the so-called efficiency of totalitarian or authoritarian governments. The wonderful Chinese artist, Wei-wei, said recently, "We see a tendency in the world to criticize democracy, and sometimes even to say that authoritarian countries like China are more efficient. That is very short-sighted," he said. "China looks efficient only because it can sacrifice most people's rights." Praising totalitarian efficiency is not new, even in our country. Back in the 1930s, America's greatest hero, the aviator Charles Lindbergh, and his wife, the daughter of a diplomat, called Nazi Germany and fascism the wave of the future, and derided democracy as a relic of the past. Similar claims, in almost exactly the same language, are made today, unfavorably comparing America to China, as in the speeches of a certain young Chinese-American venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, which have been widely circulated on the internet. You may have seen them. 75 years ago, President Franklin Roosevelt had an answer for that sort of nonsense, which applies as well today as it did back then. "The decisions of democracy," said Roosevelt, "may be slowly arrived at, but when the decision is made, it is proclaimed not with the voice of one man, but with the voice of millions. It's binding on us all, and the world is no longer left in doubt." The great British Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, added, "Democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others that have ever been tried." Unavoidably, when we talk about Taiwan, due to history, geography, economics, culture, and politics, China always crowds into the picture. Taiwan's democracy is a vibrant democracy, and it's particularly relevant to China because it disproves the Communist Party's basic notion that democracy is not compatible with Chinese tradition. Taiwan's democratic legitimacy worries the Communist leadership because they know that it enhances Taiwan's worldwide stature and provides an alternate path that China itself may someday follow.